What begins as a quiet night shift for a young medical intern turns into a nightmare soaked in whispers, reflections, and long-forgotten names. The hospital after dark takes you deep into the sealed room 604, where the phones still ring, the beds are still warm, and the dead are never truly gone. If you enjoy spine-tingling horror stories with immersive atmosphere and haunting mystery, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more journeys into the unknown. Elias Tran's shift began with the sterile quiet that only hospital nights could offer. The corridors of St. Augustine Medical Center glowed with a cold, flickering fluorescence, casting long, wavering shadows that danced across the tiled floors. At 11 p.m., the world outside had already forgotten the sun. Inside, the only sounds were the distant hum of machines, the low murmur of a few night staff exchanging patient updates, and the rhythmic click of Elias's worn sneakers echoing off the linoleum as he made his rounds. He was a third-year medical student, exhausted, anxious, and hungry for experience. Night shifts in the internal medicine wing weren't glamorous, but they were necessary, and Elias told himself he would learn something invaluable here. Yet on this night, what he learned would have nothing to do with medicine. The clock in the staff room ticked toward 2:13 a.m. Elias sat slumped in a cracked leather chair, half asleep with a patient chart on his lap. The lamp above buzzed intermittently, a soft, stuttering flicker that kept pulling his attention away from the records. The hospital, already unnervingly quiet, seemed to sink deeper into a kind of unnatural stillness. Then the phone rang, shrill, piercing, one long, continuous ring that shattered the silence. Elias blinked, startled. The phone was an old rotary model, mounted on the far wall of the break room, yellowed with age. He stared at it for a second, unsure if he was dreaming. The hospital had long since replaced these phones with newer models. That one had been disconnected for years, or so he'd been told. It kept ringing. He stood slowly, heart tapping a faster rhythm in his chest. Each footstep toward the phone echoed too loud in the small room. The moment his fingers touched the receiver, the sound stopped. He hesitated, then lifted it to his ear. Hello? Nothing. Only static. Then, just as he was about to hang up, a voice emerged. Soft, trembling, male. Is this Nurse Lang? Elias froze. No, this is Elias Tran. I'm a medical student. Who is this? A long pause. The static hissed like whispering winds across a frozen field. He's back. Room 604. He's back. Who? Who is back? The line went dead. Elias stood motionless, the dial tone buzzing in his ear. He lowered the phone slowly and stared at it, as if it might explain itself. Room 604. That room wasn't in use. He was sure of it. Just yesterday, he'd asked one of the nurses why the door was always locked. She only shrugged and said, "That room's got a history." Now, Elias's curiosity overwhelmed his fear. Grabbing his ID badge and a flashlight from the drawer, he stepped into the hall. The corridor seemed darker now, as if the lights had dimmed without warning. Every distant sound, the beep of a monitor, the creak of settling metal, felt magnified. Room 604 was on the east wing, past the ICU. As he walked, the hospital's usual hum seemed to change. Almost imperceptibly, the buzz of the fluorescents gave way to a low-frequency vibration, a subtle throbbing beneath his feet. It made his teeth ache. He passed by a nurse station, empty save for a coffee mug still steaming. Odd. Room 604 appeared at the end of the hall, just as he remembered it. Door closed, no nameplate, a small red X painted above the handle. Elias hesitated. Then he tried the knob. Locked. But as he turned away, the door creaked open behind him. He turned back, pulse quickening, and pushed the door inward. It opened with a long, painful squeal. Inside was darkness, thick, oppressive. He flicked on the flashlight. The room was empty, bed neatly made, IV stand in the corner, old blood pressure cuff on the wall. Dust danced in the beam of light like ash, but the air... The air was wrong. It was cold, far too cold, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and decay, as if something had died here and refused to leave. He stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. Elias spun, heart racing. He grabbed the handle, twisted, locked again. The flashlight flickered. Then he heard it. Breathing, ragged, uneven, coming from the bed. He turned slowly. The bed was no longer empty. A man lay there, covered in an old, yellowed hospital gown. His skin was pallid, mottled with gray patches. His eyes were open wide, too wide, lips parted in a crooked grin. He looked straight at Elias and whispered, "You shouldn't have answered." Elias stumbled back, hitting the wall. The flashlight dropped and rolled, casting spinning shadows across the room. Then the lights above blinked on, but not the sterile white of modern fluorescence. No, these lights were warm, sepia-toned, buzzing like dying insects, casting a sickly glow over peeling wallpaper and old equipment. The air thickened. A low hum started to rise, a sound like voices behind glass. Elias's eyes darted to the figure in the bed. Gone. He turned, panting. The door now stood ajar again. He ran. The hallway was no longer the one he had entered through. It stretched impossibly long, lights flickering one by one as he passed, revealing empty wheelchairs, crumpled charts, and something else. Movement in the shadows. Soft footsteps behind him. A wheeled gurney creaking in the distance. Somewhere, someone was weeping. He reached the main hall. The light snapped back to normal. The hum of machines returned. A nurse walked by, sipping coffee, nodding at him without suspicion, as if nothing had happened. Elias turned. The east wing was gone. No corridor, just a supply closet. He stood frozen. Had he imagined it? He checked his watch. 2:17 a.m. Only 4 minutes had passed. Later, in the record archives, Elias found something he wasn't meant to see. Room 604 had been sealed in 1983 after a patient died violently during an unapproved electroconvulsive therapy session. His name? Michael Renner. Age? 33. Cause of death? Cardiac arrest during procedure. Attending nurse at time of death? Lydia Lang. Last words recorded before he died. "I'll call back when the night is quiet." Elias stared at the paper. His hand trembled. The phone in the archive room began to ring. The sun had risen, but it did nothing to banish the chill that clung to Elias Tran's skin. Even in the light of day, his hands trembled as he buttoned up his coat and stepped out of the hospital's east entrance. He hadn't told anyone about what happened during the night. What could he even say? That he saw a dead man in a sealed room? That he heard whispers through a disconnected phone? That he ran down a hallway which no longer existed? No one would believe him, but he remembered. Every flicker of the light, every breath that wasn't his, every sound the shadows made as they twisted around the corners of his vision. ... Then he could see through them. Sleep did not come that morning, not even when he collapsed onto his mattress, still in his clothes. When he closed his eyes, all he could hear was the voice on the phone. He's back. By the time his next shift came, Elias had convinced himself it had been a hallucination. Stress, sleep deprivation, maybe even the hospital playing a prank on the new guy. Medical staff could be cruel when bored, but as the elevator doors opened onto the 4th floor that night, that same cold pressure wrapped itself around his chest. The same flicker in the lights greeted him like a memory refusing to die. He kept his head down. He wouldn't go near 604 again. He just had to finish his shift. The hallway was emptier than usual. No footsteps, no conversation, no nurse humming while checking vitals. Just a distant, rhythmic beeping from a heart monitor. And then, a new sound. A dragging noise. Slow, heavy. Elias paused near the nurse's station. The chair behind the desk was turned around. A clipboard lay on the floor, its pages scattered. No one in sight. He leaned over and picked up the clipboard. Patient transfer request. Michael Renner. Date, March 4th. Room 604. Status, critical. Requesting physician, Dr. A. Conrad. Elias's breath caught in his throat. Michael Renner. Again. That was impossible. The man had died in 1983. He'd seen the death certificate himself. He spun toward the hallway. Room 604 stood closed, as always. But something had changed. The red X was gone. He stared at the door, heart pounding. A faint whisper, almost like a sigh, slid through the corridor. It brushed past his ears like cold breath. "Why did you leave me there?" He backed away, but the hallway seemed to stretch, elongate, bending space itself. The overhead lights buzzed louder, then began to pop, one by one, leaving a trail of growing darkness behind him. He turned and ran. But with each step, the sound behind him grew louder. Click, click, drag. Something was following him. He burst into the stairwell, slamming the door shut behind him. It echoed with a hollow boom that didn't fade. Instead, it morphed into a laugh, dry, hollow, not quite human. He took the stairs 2 at a time, heading down to the archives. If someone was playing a sick joke, he'd find proof. Maybe there was another Michael Renner. Maybe the form was doctored. The archives were dimly lit and always smelled of mildew and paper. Rows of old patient records towered on steel shelves, stretching down narrow aisles. As Elias stepped inside, the overhead bulb flickered, then steadied. He went straight to the cabinet marked 1983. He pulled the drawer, it stuck halfway, then gave with a metallic shriek. Inside were dozens of files, aging paper crackling as he sifted through. Then he found it again. Renner, Michael. He opened the folder. Photograph of the man, pale, smiling faintly. Handwritten notes. Diagnosis, severe schizophrenia. History of hallucinations and paranoia. Final note from Dr. Conrad. Patient exhibits dissociative identity symptoms. Responds violently to isolation. Then Elias noticed something new. A small envelope clipped to the back. It had not been there last time. He opened it. Inside was a Polaroid, grainy, low resolution. It showed room 604 as it was decades ago. Old metal bed, floral wallpaper, and in the center, Michael Renner sitting upright, wide-eyed, mouth open as if caught mid-sentence. Someone had written across the bottom in red ink, "He still answers." The bulb above Elias buzzed louder. Then the photo in his hand began to warm. He dropped it. It hit the floor silently. The noise in the room changed, from silence to breathing, from breathing to whispering. He turned slowly. A shadow moved between the shelves. It paused, then kept moving. He grabbed the photo and ran. Back up the stairs, through the halls. He slammed into Nurse Tessa outside the medication room. "Jesus, Elias," she cried, catching her balance. "You look like you saw a ghost." "I think I did," he gasped. "Listen, have you ever heard of room 604? Of a patient named Michael Renner?" Her smile faltered. She glanced down the hallway toward the east wing. "Why?" she asked slowly. "Because I've been in that room, I think, and he was there." There was a phone call, his name on a form, a photo that. She gripped his arm. "Stop!" Her voice was sharp, almost afraid. "Don't talk about that room. Not out here. Not where he can hear you." "What?" She looked around, then lowered her voice. "Some of us, the older staff, we know stories about Renner. He wasn't just mentally ill. Something clung to him. When he died, it didn't leave. After he flatlined, calls kept coming from his room. The nurses who answered, they changed, or they vanished." Elias felt ice in his veins. "Why hasn't anyone closed it off completely?" "They tried. Renovated that whole wing. Sealed 604 with concrete. But the room still shows up sometimes, when it wants to. That's not possible." Tessa's expression was grim. "You're in a hospital. The space between life and death is thin here. Sometimes it tears." A cold gust swept through the hallway. The lights dimmed just slightly. Both of them looked toward the east wing. The door to 604 stood open. Only darkness beyond. Tessa whispered, "Don't answer if it rings again." But Elias wasn't sure he had a choice, because at that moment, from the staff room at the other end of the corridor, the phone began to ring. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Each shrill burst pierced through the thick silence of the hospital corridor, echoing like a scream that had no mouth. Elias stood frozen. The staff room was just down the hall, the sound coming from behind its closed door. A perfectly ordinary door. A perfectly ordinary room. except for the fact that the phone inside had no working line. Tessa backed away, her voice trembling. "Don't answer it." But Elias couldn't ignore it. Not this time. Something inside him, some raw, primal pull, drew his feet forward. Like a marionette yanked by invisible strings, he moved. One step, another. Each creak of his sneakers against the floor tiles fell in rhythm with the ringing, as if the sound itself was guiding him. He reached the door. The ringing stopped. He turned the handle. Inside, the staff room looked unchanged. Fluorescent light buzzed faintly overhead. A cracked coffee pot sat cold on the counter. A clipboard lay on the table next to a thick manila folder. The phone, the ancient rotary one mounted to the wall, hung limply, silent now. He stepped inside. Then the folder twitched. Just barely. Elias blinked. No, not twitched. That was impossible. It must have been his imagination. Still, his hands moved before he could second-guess himself. He picked up the folder. No label, no date, no name. Just a thick stack of yellowing pages clipped together loosely. He flipped it open. The first page was a patient chart. Vitals, medications, observations. But the name line was blank. The ID number was smudged, almost erased. Under diagnosis was a single handwritten note. He hears them. Elias turned to the next page. More medical scribbles. A note written in trembling cursive. Keeps asking for the nurse with the mirror eyes. Screams when left alone. Demands we answer the phone, even when it hasn't rung. The following page was stranger. A series of black and white photographs, each more unsettling than the last. Blurry images of a hospital room. Room 604. In each photo, something had changed. The curtains moved. The IV stand had shifted. A figure began to appear in the corner. Blurry, hunched, face obscured by static. The last photo was just darkness. No light, no room. Just a faint white scribble near the center that looked disturbingly like a wide, toothless grin. Behind him, the phone rang again. Elias flinched. He turned, expecting the sound to be coming from the wall-mounted phone. It wasn't. The sound was coming from inside the folder. He looked down, hands shaking. The folder vibrated, softly in time with the ringing. He opened it again. Another page had appeared. He was certain it wasn't there before. It was a transcript. Transcript, audio log, July 18, 1983, subject M. Renner. Nurse Lang. Michael, can you hear me? Renner. It's too loud. Nurse Lang. What is too loud? Renner. The phone, it's still ringing, even when I'm asleep. Nurse Lang. There is no phone ringing, Michael. Renner. A soft click echoed behind Elias. He turned. The door to the staff room had closed. He tried the handle. Locked. His breath quickened. He pounded on the door. No response. The light overhead flickered violently, buzzing louder and louder, until it was nearly a scream. Then, silence. The bulb shattered. Darkness. Complete. Then, a whisper. Not in his ear. Not in the room. Inside his head. You opened the file. Now open the door. Elias spun wildly, flashlight raised. Something moved in the corner. Slow, crawling. He aimed the beam. Nothing, just the coffee pot, overturned. The room felt smaller now, walls closing in. He backed against the far wall, heart thundering. In the dead silence, he heard it again. The soft shuffle of bare feet across tile. The rattle of breath through broken lungs. And then, the sound of paper being torn. He looked down. The folder lay on the floor, its pages fluttering, moving as if caught in a phantom breeze. Then the pages stopped. A new one sat on top. His name was written at the top in red ink. Patient Elias Tran. Status under observation. Notes. Exhibits early symptoms of intrusion. Response to stimuli increasing. May require isolation. Elias backed away from the folder, eyes wide. A handprint appeared on the wall behind him, slowly pressing outward from the inside, fingers stretching, nails dragging against the plaster. The wall groaned, cracking. He screamed and lunged for the door. This time, it opened. Light flooded in from the corridor. Tessa was standing there, eyes wide, a security guard behind her. "Elias, are you okay? You've been gone for almost an hour." "That's not possible," he gasped. "It's only been a few minutes." She looked at her watch. "No, you went in there at 2:15. It's 3:09. Elias turned back to the staff room. Empty, clean, no shattered light bulb, no folder, only silence. The security guard eyed him. "You all right, son?" Elias nodded slowly, though his hands trembled. He walked past them down the hall and into the nurse station bathroom, locked the door, turned on the faucet to drown out his thoughts. Then he looked in the mirror and stopped breathing. Over his reflection, written in the steam, as if from inside the glass, were 5 words. "You're already on the chart." The 4th floor had always felt too quiet, but now it was oppressive, the kind of silence that pressed against the skull. Elias didn't remember walking back to the hallway. His hands were still wet from the sink. But the mirror, the message, it had vanished. Steam gone. No trace of writing. Just his reflection, pale and wide-eyed, blinking back at him. He kept hearing his name in the back of his thoughts, not whispered aloud, but folded inside the folds of silence itself. Like the walls were thinking of him, or remembering him. After the staff room incident, Nurse Tessa tried to send him home. "You're exhausted," she said. "I've seen that look before. People burn out on their first night rotation all the time." But Elias stayed, not because he wanted to, because he needed to know. It wasn't just room 604 anymore. Something had followed him. The east wing was no longer accessible on the floor plans. Sealed off years ago after a fire in the electrical wiring. Or at least, that was the story told to the newer staff. But Elias had seen the hallway, walked it, heard the doors creak open one by one. And now, the shadows in that direction moved too deliberately. They lingered too long, like they were waiting for something or someone. He walked past the nurse's station and stopped in front of the east corridor door. It was chained shut, rusted padlock hanging in place. The sign read, "Authorized personnel only, closed due to structural hazards." Behind the frosted glass, he saw no movement, no flickering light, nothing. But he heard it. Whispers, not from one voice, from many, layered and overlapping, rising and falling in a distorted chant. Like breath pulled backward through a radio. He leaned closer. The voices sharpened. He's in, Stain. Not yours yet. Still breathing. Then silence. The lock clicked. On its own. Elias stepped back, but the chain slid free and fell with a dull metallic clank to the floor. The door cracked open by an inch. Air pushed through the gap, colder than any place in the hospital had the right to be. It smelled faintly of damp stone, antiseptic, and something older, mildew and copper. He pushed the door open. The hallway was longer than it should have been. Dust blanketed everything. Old gurneys lined the walls, some still covered in blood-stained sheets. The wallpaper was peeling in thick strips, revealing concrete beneath. Light fixtures flickered weakly, their filaments humming like dying insects. Elias stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him. No light now, except the faint flicker ahead. He clicked on his flashlight. Its beam cut through the dark like a scalpel through flesh. The hallway groaned. Somewhere, a metal tray crashed to the ground. He moved slowly, heart hammering. Past broken doors with faded room numbers. Past windows covered in grime and black handprints that smeared from the inside. Then he saw it. Room 610. The door was ajar, hinges rusted and barely holding. A faint scratching came from inside, like nails on plaster. Slow, rhythmic. He pushed the door wider. Empty room. No patient, just a bed, its mattress torn open. Wires from an old ECG machine hanging like veins. But someone had written on the far wall. Dozens of lines, scratched into the plaster with something sharp. They watch through the walls. They only come when you're alone. If you hear your name, it's already too late. Elias backed out of the room. His flashlight flickered again. Then he heard it. Footsteps behind him. Slow. Barefoot. Wet. He spun around. No one there. Then a whisper directly in his ear. You're not ready. He stumbled forward, panting. The walls around him seemed to pulse, as if alive. Every door he passed now had a crack in it, a thin sliver revealing darkness behind. From within those rooms, the whispers grew louder. Different voices now, some begging, some laughing, some screaming. He reached the end of the hall. A rusted plaque above the last door read, Therapy Room A. The door swung open without him touching it. Inside was darkness deeper than before. A single light bulb swayed from the ceiling, casting shadows that danced in slow, nauseating loops across the cracked tile floor. In the center of the room sat a metal chair. Straps hung from its arms. A voice echoed from the ceiling speaker, crackled, distorted. Begin the session. Elias tried to step back, but his feet wouldn't move. A cold pressure pushed against his chest. He couldn't breathe. The speaker clicked again. Subject exhibits high responsiveness to suggestion. Elevated stress levels detected. Proceeding with memory extraction. A sharp ringing filled his ears. He dropped to his knees. In his mind, he saw room 604 again. But not empty, not haunted. It was clean, bright, modern. Michael Renner sat in the chair, eyes closed, murmuring numbers. Nurse Lang stood over him. She looked up and stared straight at Elias, through time, through memory, through whatever thin veil separated past and present. "You opened the door," she said, not with anger, but pity. "You shouldn't have." Then the walls screamed. Not the people. The walls. Cracking, splitting, groaning. A black shape poured from the ceiling, crawling, twisting. It had no face, only a mouth, wide, smiling. Whispers spilled from it, more than Elias could count, more than any language could contain. He screamed. The light bulb burst. Darkness. Everything vanished. Elias awoke on the floor, outside the east wing door. The chain was back in place, the lock untouched. But there were voices behind it, still whispering, still waiting. Elias didn't remember how he got to the locker room. He awoke lying across the coal bench, the smell of antiseptic thick in his nose, clothes damp with sweat. His ID badge was turned backward on his chest. The hallway outside was too quiet. A clock on the wall read 4:06 a.m. He sat up slowly. His head throbbed like something had been inside it, digging with long fingers. His hands were shaking. He remembered the east wing, the voices, the chair, the shape with no face. And he remembered waking to laughter, not out loud, inside, like something had taken root in his thoughts. He stood, stepped to the mirror near the lockers, and stared at himself. Pale, hollow-eyed, a different person than the one who had walked into the hospital a week ago. A memory surfaced from the darkness, something he had forgotten. During orientation, one of the older residents had mentioned the basement, said it was rarely used now, that it had been sealed off years ago. The morgue especially was kept locked unless there was an overflow. But there were stories. They always came with stories. One nurse claimed she heard metal trays moving in there when no one was assigned to work. Another said she saw lights flicker under the morgue door, like someone was pacing back and forth with a flashlight. And once, a janitor quit after being trapped inside for 5 hours. No one could hear him shouting. His voice came back different. Elias pressed a palm against his temple, trying to ground himself. He had to go down there. He didn't know why. He just knew something was waiting. The elevator to the sub-basement groaned as it descended. The panel's light flickered between levels, as if uncertain where it was going. Finally, it chimed on B3, the morgue. The doors opened to darkness, not dimness, darkness. The emergency lights along the floor barely cast enough glow to see the outline of the corridor. The air was colder here, not just in temperature, but in spirit. Heavy, as if soaked with what had died and never left. He stepped out. The elevator doors closed behind him. Each footstep echoed, sharp and deliberate. The further he walked, the louder they sounded. Then, a second pair of steps joined his, soft, dragging. He stopped. So did they. He moved again. So did they. He turned around. Flashlight slicing through the dark. Nothing. just walls that hadn't been cleaned in years, streaked with water damage and patches of mold. He reached the morgue door, thick steel with a circular glass window near the top. The window was fogged, and something moved behind it. He stared, unmoving. A hand, pale, slid down the other side of the glass, slowly, leaving a faint smear. Then it vanished. The door creaked, then opened. No one was behind it. Elias raised his flashlight, heart hammering. Inside, the room stretched further than it should have. Stainless steel tables, empty gurneys, drawers lining the walls, each labeled with a number and a name. The cold in here bit through his clothes. It tasted like ice and iron. Something was playing from a speaker in the far corner. An old recording. Subject still exhibits erratic behavior. Continued claims of hearing voices. Believes he is dead. Refuses to look in mirrors. The voice was familiar. It was Elias's own, but he had never recorded that. He approached the speaker. The static deepened. Recommending permanent confinement. Patient refuses medication. Keeps repeating the same phrase. A click. Then, in his voice again. He's waiting in the drawer. Elias turned. One of the morgue drawers slid open. In the silence that followed, a sound rose. Not from the drawer, from the walls. A low, wet breathing. Inhale, exhale. Like lungs that hadn't worked in years were forcing themselves to remember. He stepped closer to the drawer. A tag dangled from its corner. Renner, Michael, DOD July 18th, 1983. He reached out. The light flickered above, then went out. A loud clang echoed through the room as the drawer slammed shut. Elias backed away, flashlight flickering. It caught shapes in the corners now. Figures, barefoot, wearing gowns, faces blurred, watching him. The room was full of them. Then the whisper came again, this time from all around. You're not a visitor anymore. The bodies moved, their heads tilted. One stepped forward. No eyes, just open sockets. Its mouth opened, too wide. A voice echoed out of it. His voice, Michael Renner. You let me out, so I let them in. Elias screamed. The flashlight dropped. Darkness swallowed everything. And still, the morgue door stood open. Elias awoke to the buzz of hospital lights overhead. He was lying in a hallway. Not the morgue, not even the basement. This was the 4th floor again, near the ICU. Everything was quiet, except for the mechanical beep of a heart monitor down the corridor and the occasional static crackle of a nurse's radio. He sat up, back pressed to the cold wall, breath uneven. His clothes were damp with sweat. His ID badge had been torn off and lay a few feet away. The flashlight was gone. So was his phone. But the worst part was the silence. Not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that follows screaming. For a moment, Elias wondered if he had dreamed it all. The drawer, the whisper, the faceless bodies. But when he touched the side of his neck, he felt a cold imprint, a perfect outline of fingers. 5 of them, faint but real. He stood slowly, muscles aching. The lights above flickered just once, then held steady. No footsteps, no voices, just the hospital at rest. He walked back toward the nurse's station. Tessa was there. She looked up from her notes, startled. "Elias, where the hell have you been?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You disappeared," she continued. "Security's been looking for you for almost 2 hours." "I was in the morgue," he whispered. Tessa froze. "No one goes to the morgue at night." "I didn't mean to, the elevator. I think someone brought me there." Her voice lowered. "What did you see?" "I saw the drawer. It opened by itself. I saw Renner's name. He spoke to me." Tessa stood up. "That's not possible." "He died 40 years ago," Elias said. She said nothing. "I saw him." Still nothing. Then she whispered, "Come with me." She led him down a narrow hallway, past the ICU and into the medical records room. The lights buzzed overhead, casting their usual sickly glow over shelves of thick folders. The air here smelled of dust and paper. She pulled a file from the archives and handed it to him. Renner, Michael. It was identical to the one Elias had found before, except now there was more. A second folder paperclipped to the back. Inside were psychiatric evaluations, staff complaints, multiple incident reports. One in particular caught his attention. Incident report, July 17th, 1983. Patient became violent during session. Began speaking in unknown language. Staff reported auditory hallucinations. Nurse Lang sedated patient. He awoke hours later with no memory. Repeated a single phrase for over an hour. He watches behind the glass. Elias turned to the final page. A photo of Renner. Pale, gaunt, bloodshot eyes fixed straight into the camera. Underneath the photo, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Not dead enough." "I don't understand," Elias said. Tessa sat down, her voice low. "Michael Renner didn't just die here. He changed this place. When he passed, and once he sees you, he doesn't forget." The lights flickered. Just once, but enough to send a chill down both their spines. Tessa stood. "You need to go. Tonight. Don't come back. Don't answer the phone. Don't look in mirrors. If you see room 604 again, do not open the door." Elias swallowed hard. "But I don't think I can leave." "Why?" He looked down at the chart in his hands. His name was now written beneath Renner's. Tran Elias. Status. Monitored symptoms consistent with Renner progression. He dropped the folder as if it had burned him. Tessa backed away. The lights buzzed louder. From down the hall, a familiar sound rang out. The rotary phone. Ringing, sharp, precise. Tessa's voice cracked. "Don't answer it." But Elias was already walking. His legs moved without permission. Each ring struck his ears like a countdown. 1, 2, 3. He reached the end of the hallway. The phone sat on a table in a storage room, light from above flickering. 4, 5. He picked it up. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice. But it wasn't Renner. It was his own, but distorted, slower, hollow. "I died 40 years ago." Click. The line went dead. Elias dropped the phone. The light overhead shattered, and behind him, in the glass of the medicine cabinet, a reflection that wasn't his was smiling back. The tape was labeled B4, East Corridor, July 12th in neat black ink. It sat alone on the metal desk in the security office, beside a battered monitor and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry insect. Elias stared at it without touching it. He wasn't supposed to be here. This room was off limits to interns. But the night shift guard, Benson, had left the door unlocked when he went out for his smoke break. Elias had slipped inside without thinking. Drawn by a compulsion he no longer questioned, the tape was waiting for him. He slid the VHS into the ancient player and hit play. Static. Then the timestamp blinked onto the screen. 01:56 a.m. A view of the East Corridor. Dim lighting. Silent. The faint sway of the overhead lamps casting shadows that trembled like something afraid. Elias sat forward. At times, they seemed to stretch vertically, like figures caught mid-stumble in an impossible frame. The video shook once. Then the screen filled with static. Elias reached for the fast-forward button, fingers trembling. The timestamp jumped. 0:12 a.m. The door to room 604 opened on its own, but the room had no camera. He watched for movement in the hallway. Anything. Then he saw it. A figure stepped out of room 604. It was tall, wearing a hospital gown soaked from the waist down, head tilted at a sharp angle, mouth open, no eyes, and looked straight into the camera. Elias recoiled. The screen went black. When it returned, the timestamp read 3/01 a.m. The figure was gone. So was the door. No sign of Elias. No trace of anything. It was like it had never happened. He ejected the tape and stared at it. He remembered walking that corridor. He remembered the whispers, the shadows. But the footage showed no one except the thing that had come out of room 604. The lights in the security office flickered. Once, twice, then off. Elias stood still, listening. The silence stretched long and tight, like piano wire. Then, a slow scrape, metal on metal. Something moved behind the wall. He turned toward the utility closet, where unused monitors and backup tapes were kept. From beneath the door, a trickle of dark fluid began to seep out, thick, black, smelling of rot and rust. The handle turned. Once, twice, then silence. Elias backed away, heart hammering. The door opened an inch. The monitor behind him switched on by itself. Footage rolled across the screen. But this time, it wasn't the corridor. It was the morgue. The drawer was open. A body lay inside, pale skin, lips parted in a frozen whisper. It was him. Elias stared at the screen in disbelief. The monitor crackled, flickered, and the figure in the drawer sat up. In the room, the closet door creaked wider. A cold wind pushed through, and from behind him, a voice, his own, distorted, flat. "You never left." Elias turned around. No one was there, but the tape still played, and on the screen, the morgue drawer remained open, waiting. Elias couldn't remember how he left the security office. One moment, he was staring at the tape, at the figure rising in the morgue drawer, at his own lifeless face on the screen. The next, he was stumbling down the stairwell, hand trailing along the cold metal rail. Each floor he passed echoing with muffled, unfamiliar voices, whispering names he didn't recognize. He couldn't tell if they were calling out to him or from him. He reached the third floor. Silence. The lights above flickered steadily now, as if trying to hold back something just beneath the surface of the building's hum. The scent in the air had shifted. Less bleach, more old paper, and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in a vase. He paused outside the old wing break room, drawn by the distant sound of humming. A woman's voice, soft, nostalgic, like a lullaby that had forgotten its words. He pushed open the door. It was warm inside, brighter than the rest of the hospital, too bright. The small room looked like a memory. Coffee pot full, old floral wallpaper. A newspaper from 1981 folded neatly on the table. A ceramic clock ticking softly above the fridge. And a nurse stood by the window. Her back was turned. She wore a pale blue uniform, the style outdated by at least 40 years. Her hair was tied into a neat bun, though strands had come loose, curling along her shoulders. Her hands moved slowly as she wiped something from the countertop. A cloth soaked in a red so dark it looked black in the light. "Hello?" Elias said, his voice barely rising above the static buzzing in his ears. She didn't turn. He took a step closer. I'm Elias. I think I'm being followed. I think something..." "Someone. Renner." The nurse spoke, cutting through the air like a blade. Renner was never the first. He froze. She continued wiping, never the only one. "This hospital has always had cracks. We patch the walls, but the echoes bleed through." Elias stepped forward again. "Are you Nurse Lang?" The woman paused, then turned. Her face was calm, kind even, but her eyes, they were mirrors, not a metaphor, not a trick of the light. Actual glass, flat, reflective. Her eyes showed him his own wide-eyed terror. Behind him, shapes began to form in the reflection. Figures moving where no one stood. She smiled. "I stayed too long, Elias." The lights overhead buzzed louder, stuttering with tension. "I was on the night shift. When Renner died, he didn't leave. Not really. They called it an electrical failure. Said the machines glitched. But the truth was simpler." She walked toward him, slow and steady. He called someone, and they answered. The room dimmed with each of her steps. The air grew thick. "He told me to look, so I did." Into the mirror. Elias backed away, his heel knocking into a stool. "What are you?" The nurse tilted her head. "Still working." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a name tag. It read, Lang, Lydia. Night supervisor, status, active, shift started, July 18, 1983. Shift ends. Elias stared at the line beneath her start date. No end. She offered him the tag. "Take it. You've been clocked in since the call. It's your rotation now." The lights cut. Darkness. Total. Then, a rhythmic beeping. But it wasn't from a heart monitor. It was a time clock. Elias looked around. The break room was gone. He now stood in a long, unfamiliar corridor lined with lockers and clipboards. A punch clock ticked on the wall beside him. In his hand, the name tag, not Lang's, his own. Tran Elias. Night intern shift started. 2:13 a.m. Shift ends. He dropped it. It clattered to the floor but didn't bounce. It landed flat, heavy. Behind him, the humming began again. The same lullaby. Only now, it wasn't nostalgic. It was hungry. He turned, and at the end of the corridor stood the nurse, unmoving, smiling. "You can't leave until someone answers your call." Then the hallway stretched, lights failing one by one, and from every direction came the sound of ringing phones. Hundreds of them, all calling his name. Elias ran, down corridors that curved when they should have been straight, past gurneys covered in sheets that bulged with shapes too still to be living, past walls that pulsed with a slow, sick rhythm, like they were breathing. He didn't know what floor he was on anymore. The signs had no letters, only numbers that shifted when he blinked. Every hallway smelled like old paper and old blood. Every corner whispered his name in tones not meant for human mouths. He needed a place to hide, a place that felt real. He found himself outside a patient ward, room 610. He didn't remember walking here, didn't remember deciding, but the door stood ajar, like it had been waiting. Inside, the room was bathed in soft orange light from a flickering wall lamp. The bed was made, fresh linens, white, crisp, clean. The kind of bed waiting for a new admission. But there was no chart, no name on the door, only a folded gown at the foot of the mattress. He stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, not from the heater. It was deeper than that. The warmth of a body that had just left the bed. The kind of warmth that lingers after something lies still for hours or days. He reached out and touched the sheets. Still warm, still soft. He pulled back the blanket and saw an indentation, human-shaped, fresh. Elias backed away. The monitor beside the bed beeped once, then again. Its screen was blank. Then words scrawled across it in red, still admitted. He stumbled out into the hallway, but it had changed again. It wasn't the same corridor. The lighting was wrong. The tiles were darker, stained. He turned, and room 610 was gone. In its place, a rusted elevator with the doors forced halfway open. A voice behind him whispered, "You checked in, but you never checked out." He spun. No one, just the sound of something wet moving across the floor. He turned and dove into the elevator shaft. Darkness swallowed him. No falling, no impact, just silence. Then he was standing in a room. Room 604. But this time, it wasn't abandoned. The lights were on. The walls were a dull green, cracked in places. The bed was occupied, and in it lay a man, eyes open, staring, breathing. It was Elias, himself, but pale, still, smiling faintly. Machines beeped beside the bed, though none were plugged in. Elias stepped closer. The body blinked. Slowly, then turned its head toward him. "You're late," it whispered. Elias stepped back. The walls around him rippled, peeling like old skin. From behind the curtains, other patients began to appear. All of them wide-eyed, all of them him. Different versions, each with a different wound. A slit throat, burned skin, missing eyes, but all smiling, all watching. The real Elias, if he was still real, screamed. The body in the bed sat up. You thought death was the end, it said. But this place remembers. It keeps what it sees. Every intern, every scream, every echo. The patients moved closer, their movements jerky like puppets on tangled strings. The walls cracked. Through the gaps, he saw the hospital spreading forever. Endless hallways, endless rooms. All of them labeled 604, and every bed was still warm because no one ever truly left. Elias felt his limbs begin to stiffen, felt the cold press into his bones, felt the bed rising behind him, inviting him back. The voice whispered one last time close to his ear. You're not Elias anymore. You're just the next bed to fill. And the door closed behind him. It was 2:13 a.m. again. The clock on the wall ticked in soft, slow beats. Each second passed like a drip of cold water into an open wound. The lights above Elias hummed a dull, numbing tone, steady and inescapable. He was seated on the edge of a hospital bed. White sheets, clean, still warm. His hands trembled, though he didn't feel cold anymore. Not really. That kind of sensation had dulled. Along with time, along with self, everything felt distant, wrong. He looked around the room. Always 604. No matter where he walked in this place, no matter which door he opened, it led back here. The green walls, the flickering bulb, the faint metallic taste in the air, like blood on surgical tools, like teeth clamped too tight, and the phone. The same old rotary phone mounted on the wall beside the window that showed no view, only darkness. It hadn't rung since he arrived. Not until now. Ring! The sound pierced the silence like a scalpel through skin. Ring! He stood, legs stiff like they hadn't moved in years. He stepped toward the phone, one slow step at a time. Ring! Each ring echoed louder than the last, overlapping with the beat of his heart. He pressed a trembling hand against the receiver. His breath hitched. He remembered what Tessa had said. Don't answer the phone. He remembered what the nurse with the mirror eyes had said. You can't leave until someone answers your call. He remembered the whisper in the morgue. You're already on the chart. The phone kept ringing. He picked it up. Hello? He whispered. A pause, then static, then a voice. But not one he recognized. It was a child's voice. Is this room 604? Elias blinked. Yes. A breath. My brother died there, a long time ago, but he still calls me sometimes. Elias didn't respond. He says he's not alone anymore. That's then a faint sound beneath it. Breathing, not the child's, heavy, wet, close. Can I talk to him? The voice asked. Elias opened his mouth, but something else answered. Not his voice, a rasp. I'm not Elias. The line went dead. The room darkened. All light vanished except a faint red glow from the call indicator on the phone, still pulsing. The walls began to bleed shadow. It oozed from the cracks, from under the door, from inside the bed. The mirror in the corner flickered with impossible reflections. Not just Elias. Dozens of him. Hundreds. Each trapped in their own version of room 604. Each one repeating the same words. "I'm not Elias." The voice inside him whispered again. "We are the answered calls." A low hum began beneath his feet. The floor vibrated. Then the intercom came on. That old grainy hospital speaker. It crackled. Then a voice, automated and emotionless. "Shift change initiated. Next admission confirmed." Elias looked down. The name tag on his chest changed. The ink twisted. It no longer read Tran Elias. It now read Ren. But the rest was scratched out. The walls around him screamed. The bed turned cold. The door slammed shut. Outside, in the real world above the forgotten floors, a nurse reviewed the new night roster. One name was listed at the bottom. No ID, no date of entry. Just the room number. 604. And next to it, in faded ink, a note. "Still answers the phone. ...